Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Geeta Pyne is currently Chief Enterprise Architect, Platform and Architecture at Intuit. Geeta Pyne has extensive experience in technology strategy, architecture, and digital solution delivery. As lead architect, she has led global companies through digital transformation, cloud migrations, and enabled new business models. She has worked with both product development and business technology solutions delivery. She brings enterprise mindset while working a startup agile fashion. Recently, as Vice President of Data at Zuora, she drove data strategy and execution to help the company scale to $1 billion. Prior, she worked at multiple high-tech companies from healthcare to supply chain to cloud data management. She started her career as a research scientist developing algorithms for satellite image processing and takes pride in holding IP in India's first parallel computer PARAM and image processing system ISROVISION. In the recent past, she has laser focused on data, machine learning AI, and using data as a competitive differentiator. Welcome, Geeta. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to UNBOSSED. My guest today is Geeta Pyne, Chief Enterprise Architect, Platform and Architecture at Intuit. Welcome, Geeta, to the podcast.
Good morning, Marina. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and thank you for waking up early. I know you are on the West Coast.
Yes. Friday. So I'm a bit tired. So
we'll make it fun. I know it's early. Yes. Also, you're my first West Coast guest.
I know. I feel privileged.
I have officially expanded the podcast to the coast. I think that's an accomplishment.
Yes, and I feel really so lucky to represent all the great women out in the world. Thank you.
Beautiful. No, you're welcome. No, thank you for coming, actually. Mm-hmm. All right, so Geeta, you are a woman in tech in the West Coast, and I feel like we have so much to unpack there. At the same time, I want the listeners to know something about you, your story, and where do you come from, and how did you grow up?
Wow, that's a way back, but I think it's a good to begin. Like, let's start at the very beginning. So I was born in Calcutta in India. It is a city in the eastern part of India. Yeah. And so I come from Calcutta in India and a family of sisters and brothers. So really, I would say who I am today is based on like exactly, it might sound like a cliche, but I think it is where I was born. The love and affection and being there for each other, is what made me. And then going to the school, I went to school when I was like 2 years old. I cried to go to school because my sisters used to go. And I would say I was very fortunate to, kind of grow up in a not so conventionally, like this is what you do and this is the format. And that's what kind of get to know me. You'll see, like, don't put me in a box. I'll do my way.
Yeah.
And so I was exposed to really learning in a different way, like, when I was 2 years old. So you can be given like maybe, some clay and just go and make anything out of it. Or you write something. So you get, you get taught on the foundations and the fundamentals, but you never get to say, okay, here is, read the book and answer the question. So that I think was really, really interesting for me. And also as a child, we had some financial struggle in the family growing up due to some political unrest going on in West Bengal in India back then. So my father had lost his business. So then I got a scholarship from Government of India. So I was able to apply, appear in a All India Government of Scholarship test. And that gave me a ticket to going to a really, really, accomplished good school in Calcutta. And it was a boarding school. So I stayed away from home when I was like 9 years old. and growing with
Wow.
a lot of girls in the school. And again, I can talk all day long, as you said, like going back. But I think a lot of things that you learn, like being there, it's not just about you, it's about the team. I mean, that has shaped me throughout and never give up, right?
Yeah.
There's always a way. And yeah.
Yeah. What, like, you know, thinking deeply about those experiences, I wonder, you know, when you talk to perhaps other women that have a more traditional Indian background, what do you think were key moments or key aspects that enabled you to be the woman you are today?
Yeah, that's a very deep question. There's so many moments, Marina, like not just one. I think I would say, coming from a not so financially affluent background and going to a school when you walk in at such a tender age and when you're surrounded by all these girls, most of them come from, because it was quite an expensive school and I was fortunate to get some scholarship paid all my education and lodging. I think the moment just walking in, feeling very nervous, and I used to like study prior to coming to that school. I studied in my vernacular language, which was Bengali, and I was walking in the school, which is everybody speaks English. And of course, I know how to read and write, but I was not comfortable in speaking, right? I think, but what the moment was, I was very nervous walking in the class. But what I found out that the moment you got good in something, you was very good in maths. And as soon as the teachers and the class students found out, like, hey, this is a maths genius almost, right? That just started to make me comfortable in feeling. So I would say in that moment that was, if you are good in something, do not worry. You have to be, really in your craft. You got to go deep and be good at acceptance, social conformance. Those things will come. So that was, I would say, my very first moment of truth.
I like that. You know what's funny about what you just said right now that I realize is I was also really good at math, and I found myself in a situation where I did not speak the language that was spoken in school, or I did not learn the language. And the funny part about it is that math is just universal, right? It's almost kind of like coding, where you're like when you're like, you don't need to know English or French or Italian or Spanish or whatever, because you know numbers, and numbers speak for themselves.
Then you gravitate, like people just surround you and they like to work with, and then you start to, so finding your first anchoring moment, and also it happens naturally. But I think that it takes you to also everyone, like find those moments that you are good at and what you can contribute. Forget about what others can do for you. What is it that you can bring for others?
I like that. So, how did you then grow up? So you went to boarding school. Were you in boarding school most of your youth?
Yeah, from my 6th to the 12th grade, like all my middle school, high school. Then also I did engineering, like I did computer science engineering. That was also a residential engineering college. So I was away from home. And then my first job was also in a different city in India. So
wow,
I've been ever since away from home.
How did you have any conflict culturally with your home culture and what you were doing with boarding school, personally?
Culturally, the boarding school gave me a lot of discipline. You have to, so I think one culture was different, was like, of course, you can't just do random things, right? You have to be like, wake up at 5:30 in the morning, 6:30 you go down for the breakfast, and 7:30. So everything, like there was a rhythm to it, like you got to do things like, so I think that was one culture difference. Of course, like from my family, everybody was like, we were like, happy family. Like, yeah, you go to, you do your studies, you go to school, but that was, I think, one of the biggest thing. The other is, I would say, students were all over from India. So learning to, again, like where people come from, the context and the background of everybody is different, right? I come from a different place, others come. So just getting to know and understanding everybody and how to still connect. So how do you connect with someone? How do you become more inclusive? So which you take for granted when you are all like in a homogeneous family, even though you are different, but there is still one common thing that you are growing up with versus going to the school, and a lot of independent, like I would say both independence, freedom, and with that comes responsibility.
Yeah.
You don't have anyone to like call your, your sister or mother, like every time you have a problem.
Yeah.
And then figuring things out and think that, how do you solve a problem? Whether it's technical, personal, or you don't get along with someone.
Absolutely.
Try to figure those things out. I think culturally that was, different.
Yeah. It makes total sense. And it's interesting to me that you have not mentioned any gender roles in this conversation, right? I asked you generally if there's any culture clash with home and family. So I guess just let me ask outright, were there any gender role expectations that your family had of you that clashed with you being an independent woman who was studying at a boarding school, who was away from home, and perhaps just talk to me about that.
I would say I'm really, really fortunate that my mom, even though she had not, she didn't go beyond high school, right? Mm-hmm. But she was one of the smartest, and, again, I'll get emotional, but because she's no more, but I think one of the strongest women and that, had influenced her life. And she always believed, because she could not do what she wanted to, she was really smart. She was very good in math. You can just do numbers. So she wanted us to all really get educated. So in our family, actually, it was not a distinction between, I had brothers and sisters. Everybody, one thing we knew, you have to be good in something and you have to go to school. So that expectation. And I was also told, when I talked about the boarding school and the scholarship, I remember the day when I walked with my mom to this, institute, this government building, which was actually giving the scholarship. And the guy there was a gentleman, and he told my mom that, okay, now that she's going to go to this boarding school, she's going to be studying with a lot of rich students. Are you afraid that she's not going to fit in your family anymore? My mom said, I don't think so. And if she becomes, that's what it is, her path. So she, at that moment, not being educationally like you and me, but was able to make a judgment on the spot to tell she can be what she wants. My job is to give her the education, and she found the best. She will go give us some platform to kind of get educated. So I don't think that, I come very fortunate to be coming from a family that where we were you just go and make yourself, but do know what is right or wrong. Do know what is your ethically, what you should or should not do. And that's why I was the first person to be away from family, going to boarding school, working for Indian Space Research Organization in a different state across the country. First person to come to US too.
Love it. Good job, Mom. She sounds really amazing. I'm so happy for mothers like that. That's really cool. And you just introduced the organization that I wanted to talk to next. So you did work for a space organization, Indian Space Research Organization. And that is really cool. So were you planning to become some type of astronaut, or what was your angle there?
I don't plan too much. So I go with the flow. But so what I wanted to do, two things. Because number one, when I did my engineering, one of the things was we learned a lot about image processing and parallel. We were just getting exposed to that in the class, in advanced computing class. So I had that hunger. I'm very curious and, hungering and hunger and learning. So then I got this job interview, and I was able to, ace through the interview and got it, right? But my interest was basically two ways. One is because I had the scholarship I grew up with, I can never pay back that. But if I at least work for a company which is a part of the government, I can feel in my little way I'm at least doing something for the country that made me, right? But secondly, it was just hunger for my hunger and learning. And that was your first job. You don't know anything, right? But all I knew is I want to solve hard problems. And that thing sounded very, very I had other jobs too, which were much more, higher paying jobs. This didn't pay me much, but I knew that when I interviewed with all these research scientists, I was like, there's something in it that I think is going to push my limit.
I love that. I love that. And you work in a multitude of jobs in India, actually. But it sounds like, based on the resume, you came through the US, an early stage IBM, which kind of makes me wonder, like, what was was there any differences that you experienced? Like, you were still early career, I feel like, right?
Yes.
And so you worked in India for a while within technology, and then at some point you joined was IBM. Tell me the story. Like you were at CompuWare and then IBM, right? So is that how you came to the US?
I came to actually an Indian consulting company, which was like HCL, but that it placed me in CompuWare. So, and CompuWare and IBM, I was a software consultant.
Yeah.
So I would say I came to California for CompuWare, which was okay, but then I had to move to North Carolina for IBM, and that is where I saw the culture shock, right? Because California is people like you, me, everybody, right?
Yes.
Walking in, and it's a long time back, walking in North Carolina, landing in the airport and going to try to take a rental car. And I was like skinny, half the size of what I am, very raw, and people just, the stare I got, like, it's like a rich white, like every white people. And, I just felt that totally like I'm not at home. Which
wow.
The first few months when I was in California, because it was very calm, like everybody, there's a people welcome
culture.
California is a melting pot almost, right, for every culture. So that was culture, it was different. And I have to say, working as a consultant in IBM, I didn't enjoy it because I had so much more to offer. And because I was a consultant, I was very constrained. Like, okay, very little thing you do, within half a day, I'll be done. And I'm just like, okay, I can see people in that room are trying to solve some problem in the closed room, but I'm not part of that because I am an outsider over there. And that's why I kind of got out of consulting and I moved to New York and started my next chapter.
Nice. Did you have that awareness when you were at IBM of what you just told me right now, or is that hindsight, what you just said? So like when you were there in that moment, is that how you felt?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And you wanted to get into that room.
Yes.
So badly. And you felt like you couldn't. Could you get into that room though? Like looking back right now, would you have pushed the door open and got yourself?
That's a great question, because I think and again, you talked about a little bit about culture or gender. Probably if I looked one of them, and not this Indian, skinny girl sitting, and obviously I'm much more accomplished and gotten bigger in my size also.
Confident, yeah.
I would have probably done that. Hey, what are you doing? But I didn't have I went and talked to my manager over there, and he said, no, that's not your problem. But probably, if it is today, I'll just knock on the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Knock on the door and get in there. I think that's, even if your manager says don't do it, I would say knock on the door and go do it, right? That sounds really interesting. Just for me to know, IBM is a staple American company. How was early day IBM? Because that was, I want to say pretty early, like
not too early.
Not too early, late 90s.
No, it was late 90s, 98, 90, late 90s. It was big corporate, It's like big corporate, you walk in and everybody is with the, suits, and I didn't feel like I belonged there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Then went to New York.
Yes.
New York City, Mount Sinai, very well known health system. So from California to North Carolina to New York, how was that experience for you? And then how were you thinking about your career growth also as you were making these moves, right?
Yeah, I am a lane changer. So, and I just take almost like you throw yourself in, possibilities way, not even opportunities way. Actually, that was something that when I left my India ISRO job, that time my manager in my farewell said, some people go for opportunities, some people go for possibilities. Geeta, I categorize for the second category. She goes for possibilities. And
I love it.
and
Yeah.
so when I went to New York, it was just for the job, like because I was so bored in, doing as a consultant in IBM that but New York, I felt really connected to New York. So when you are landing in New York and I see this city, right, the city never sleeps. And the next day when I'm walking and you say this like, don't walk, and people start walking, I felt like where I come from, Calcutta, it is the city of joy and the people just do whatever they do. And I felt like, oh my God, at that moment, this is me. This is where I belong, right? So that's the first part of like, if you like the place, it was hard to, move your stuff from one coast to the other again, because I had a job to come back to California when I was in North Carolina, because I did not want to leave California. But then I moved and nobody could make out like, what happened to you that you just decided to live in New York? Yeah, I think that was one of the personal decision, both personal and professional life I made, because you talk about like career. That's where I started to building relationship. The boss who hired me in Mount Sinai, we went the same group almost. We went to our next job. He hired me in electronics, and that actually I have a call with him later this afternoon, Charlie Bonham. Like these connections you start building, and the value of the connection you start to realize later.
Wow, that's a really long relationship, actually. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm all about relation.
What made you move to New York? How was that decision made? Was it, you tell me about it.
Yeah. It was with the job, because, I need a job for my visa status as well as, paying my dues, right? So I got a job in Mount Sinai Medical Center that time. So that job was my entry to the city. And I think the city, the people, the place, the way, it just felt like, so welcoming. The struggle was like finding an apartment in Manhattan that I could have.
That's the struggle in New York.
The struggle in New York. But walking around, like I was hardly home. But I think the job that Mount Sinai and was really, really so like, I coming from the space research, working things for, mankind, like doing, the next job, like, at Mount Sinai, you are actually used to work for this, where all this, hospital information systems are connected. So I was connected, doing that, making
Connection.
sure patient to outpatient to everything system flows. And if you make a glitch in your code and software, it could have an impact in a patient's healthcare, right? So that was just so fulfilling, and feeling good about what you do and making an impact to patient healthcare.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, and it really is on brand with who you are and who you've grown to be in your career. How long were you in New York for?
So in the city, I was there for a year and a half. Then I moved to Long Island. So I was in New York for a very long time, from like 1998 to 2005. But I moved from city to Long Island.
Got it. Okay. And then at some point, you decided to go back to California or the West Coast. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, life happened. So we moved to Boston. I moved to Boston. Then then my husband's actually he had to move to California for his work. So I was like, oh yeah, I was the first person. Let's go back. I mean, not go back. My husband hasn't been here lived in California, but then we moved back to California about 12 years back.
Got it. What were you doing in Boston?
I was still working for this Long Island company, but my husband was in Boston, so I moved. So I became a remote employee for this company, Aero Electronics, which was a global electronic distributor. I traveled around the world and within US for the company.
So you experienced remote like before remote was a thing nowadays.
Yes.
What can you tell us about remote then versus now?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. So remote then, because not everybody is remote, although it was a global company and you have people, but when you are not in one of the main offices, people, you have to make your presence by calling your name out that, hey, interrupt I have something to say, because if 10 people are in the room and there is one person remote, like very little, attention is paid. So I think that was one. Second was technology advancements. Not everybody was always on a Zoom call, or a whichever video conferencing like we are on. So not being able to see people. And I think the main difference was that people just didn't embrace that there could be 1 or 2% of people that remote, because that was by exception, not by norm. But fast forward now, of course, the remote is now everybody's remote, right? And I think the last 2 years, right, it has been a different struggle, right? Because now it is not just 1 or 2% from a company perspective being remote, that's what you're accommodating, but it has made us to be more like, this whole digital body language that has been emerging. I think people are becoming more aware of how to work with anybody and anywhere, being more considerate. I think people are like having that tolerance and thinking through first before asking is happening now versus what used to happen back in 15 years back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What something else that I guess I kept wondering about is you know throughout your whole career, and I think we obviously we have to, because of time, we have to kind of go through it, but you grew to be from a senior software specialist at Mount Sinai to a senior enterprise architect for digital transformation at Arrow Electronics, and you actually were really successful at it sounds like you were really successful at career growth while remote, while moving from different places, right? So I'm just really curious, and for the people that are listening, what are your strategies for career growth, and how did you accomplish this? And you have basically, like, the question is, do you have advice for women that are looking to grow in their tech career, on how to do so?
Absolutely. I don't know the right advice or what, but I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I think when
what worked for you?
Career growth, right? I mean, you could go horizontally, you could go vertically. I have taken a lot of horizontal growth because I wanted to grow my other muscles, right? So as a software, you can be an engineer in one domain, but I like big picture. So I like to know everything. So your growth could be, like I would say, always find opportunities almost like adjacent to what you are doing. If you want to grow, because it is important to, especially in today's day and age, to have good enough understanding of everything that runs the company from both technology side. Also, another growth opportunity was like getting into a large, strategic initiatives that are transforming the company, right? If you be part of that, one of my growth was initially, right, I was part of hand-selected few people for understanding what do we need to do as a company to grow. And I was the technical lead back then, a long time back. But try to get involved. So that gave me an opportunity to learn both business as well as technology. So I would say, like, grow horizontally a little bit before you decide to go, vertically, right? If you want to be technically strong, and finding 1 or 2 opportunities that pushes you're outside your comfort zone. Do not stay in the only way to grow is get out of comfort zone. And as soon as you feel that you are just kind of getting too comfortable, it is time to go. That's how I have always done, right? And that has always, because we have a tremendous capacity in your brain, right? But we hardly use any little. And more comfortable you get, the growth. So just, never stop learning and never stop growing by taking on things that might find it hard, and those are the things that you should go after.
Wow, I love that advice. Can we unpack what it means to take a horizontal position, and specifically, like, give us an example of how you did that?
Yeah, so I was I would say horizontally moving, right? I was a technical lead, like, say, in one of our business domain, like at Arrow Electronics, for example, right? And I kind of picked there, right? Then my horizontal move was, it was not a promotion, but at the same level as a lead architect, I was thrown into another business, which was actually Arrow's completely different line of business, which I had no knowledge about other than knowing the business name. And that operating model was completely different. The technology that was powering the business was different. So my position, so I kind of moving there, but horizontally, so that my growth became then learning that whole, 9 years around the business and technology and helping them do the transformation, right? So
Got it.
architect to architect, still your craft is the same, but the horizontal position was your business domain and technology domain that you're doing it, right? Similarly, like as I moved from, say, company to company, I was in VMware as a senior director of running enterprise architecture digital. I took a lateral position in Veritas when I went as a senior director for architecture for product. But my growth was I completely switched to a different domain of data management and data protection, which I did not have any knowledge about, right? I mean, I knew basics, right? So again, so it could be within your company, a different project, a different business, or you can go to a different company if you're hungry to learn a different industry, right? Now, from fast forward, I'm in Intuit. I'm learning fintech as the chief enterprise architect, which I have done like years back, right? So I'm still the enterprise architect. I have not. I feel like I haven't, grown, but I'm learning whole new way of doing it in a fintech company, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
How did you get to that architect level though? So like, it sounds like there's like vertical, horizontal, and then maybe some more vertical and then more horizontal. Is that kind of like how you imagine it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we got the horizontal part. Take different roles in same company, but in different departments, or in in different companies, different industries. But how do you advocate for yourself when your growth is vertical? So becoming from software engineer, going all the way to architect.
Oh, that's a very hard one, tough one. There is no formula for that. But just getting better and better in your craft by, I would say, starting your mentoring and grooming others. So as we think about whether it is software engineer to tech lead to architect, two dimensions. One is from who are your followers, who are you grooming up? Because if you grow up, you need when you look back, you need a team behind you, right? Even though not a line manager. The other is being able to see the big picture and break it down for others, right? So starting to learn the art of abstraction. So you have to still, you can go roll up your sleeves and go to the weeds, but knowing when to go down versus when to see, but being able to see the big picture, being able to see the connections, that's what makes you an architect. So I think if you want that growth, start with leading other engineers, start from the top, go closer to the business problem you're trying to solve for, and really try to abstract everything, make things simpler. The other is you should be able to, now you're transitioning to crossing that chasm of, you should be able to speak like to business, you should be able to speak to your product manager, you should be able to speak like the non-tech speak, as well as on the other side, you are the glue now that can translate really complex requirements. Like, okay, we want to be the, whatever the growth or the business goal is, like you want to be the number one in this, to unpack that, break it down, and then translate into bite-sized chunks that your engineers can do. That's
beautiful.
Yeah.
That is a really good advice. I am assuming you have a lot of women in your organization and women in tech, and you pay attention to those numbers and and all that good stuff. What have you found are the biggest challenges for women across all of your experience into growing into more senior technical roles? And how do you think we can combat those things?
Yeah, I think so. Intuit, one of the company that I'm really fortunate to now work for is Intuit. I think we have been exceeding the target we have. And just because I would say starts from the top, our CTO, Marina, so we are fortunate to have right from the top technology position is a woman.
Nice.
But in general, I think I think it's like, the biggest struggle, I think, is do we have enough in the STEM? Like, are we actually getting girls and women in technology, like, getting into the STEM, right? Everybody needs to learn that. So they start from there. But then what I have seen is like once you get in the companies, right, where the numbers have been dropping, I'm sure you know it in the middle area. Like I think entry level we get pretty good and starts to drop in the middle. And I think I don't have kids and you have one, but I have seen a lot.
I have three.
Three? No, okay. And I don't, it's a separate conversation one day. How do you do what you do? But I think people like it is on both sides. It is, I think, the girls and the women that are going through that, taking breaks in career is always good, right? Whatever you need to do to have your balance. But then the companies how do you bring them back? I know a lot of companies are doing that now. Like, how do you bring back women who took a break, maybe 3 years, 5 years, whatever, create their opportunities, right? So that so that it doesn't drop and they don't have to come back and go up the ranks again to think about, right? So how do we create that other kind of opportunities to embrace and bring in? But the other thing, I think it's not just about the number. I think we get so hung up on, is it a 30% target? Instead, try to find out, like, what do you need as a balance, right? I think every opinion, every diversity is about embracing everybody's, thinking, thought process. And has to be a way of embracing. It's not just a woman. It's not underrepresented. We have to think about, we have a diverse culture and diverse opinion in the team. And I think then things will happen. Whether you need a woman technology or you need somebody underrepresented minority or you need a different mindset. I think it is about what does it really take to bring this diverse mindset together to really flourish and uplift our, the team standard. I think unless that happens, it will be a number and will be a numbers game and we'll have a checklist. I mean, I'm very passionate about this because I see a lot of, and I don't just say, practice what you are saying and create that inclusive culture. And I think then it will start to happen, no matter what.
Yeah. You have experienced this a lot in your career, I am assuming. And so I wonder that, based on your experience, what are some of the tactics that you implement now to create this inclusive culture? And I'm sorry, Chicago sirens are like...
That's right.
It's Chicago. It's like, it's always like this.
Yeah. So I think it is, again, as an inclusive culture, I think buck starts from the top, as well as each of us have a responsibility in the team, right? So you be open, be open. Like I think that simple things we can do. Like when I'm in a team meeting, there are always those loudmouth people, and there are some people that are very quiet, right?
Yeah.
But do we give them a voice? I'm always about going after those quiet ones, the ones that are underdogs. So how do you, as a leader or a manager, create that environment that you start to push the people get out of their, that comfort zone to able to speak up and create that, like, hey, everybody has a say, right? So I think for that inclusion, it just starts from taking those baby steps. Like if you're running your own team meetings or you're having a family dinner or those, letting people to speak up and listen, and don't cut people. I mean, I have been many a time, didn't find my voice, right? Because I would not speak up and still till now I do that. Actually, when yesterday somebody was pinging me saying, Geeta, nobody's talking about architecture. I said, I don't need a mouthpiece. But then I realized if I don't speak up in that, there is a team behind, and my responsibility that I have, that stream is not represented over there. So it is not about me. It is about that discipline, right? I mean, that is a little bit different, but I think each of us creating just letting that opportunity for people to be able to speak up. And if you see some places that why somebody is not there, why do I see a room full of, whether it is men or it could be even women, right? Why somebody is left out? Like, don't put anybody behind. I think those tactics, just be normal human being, be considerate and think about how would you feel like if you are one of those that was left out, right?
Yeah, I really like what you said about don't only think about who to invite, but also think about who you're excluding.
Yes.
By, because when by default, when we invite somebody into a meeting, we are by default excluding others, right? Because it's not an open meeting, right? So like, who are we asking ourselves a question, like, who are we excluding? And just taking like 30 seconds to be conscious about like, who am I excluding, and asking specifically. I think that could be really powerful to like, just check with yourself and making sure that you are including as many and diverse opinions as possible in the room. I know we were talking about like creating an inclusive environment and really being part of that inclusivity. Throughout the years, are you feeling like we're making progress?
I think we are, but is it at the rate? Because many a time I think again, it just becomes like, I think the progress has to be like, it's like almost like ground movement, right? It cannot be done through just corporates, offices, not through your diversity inclusion officer, just having that. I think many companies are trying to do, intention is right, but I'm not sure is the outcome getting translated really at the rate.
So why is that?
I think because we get too hung up on our projections of those images. And I don't know exactly, why, but what I feel like what I see in different companies, whether like where my husband works or I work or my friends and friends work, there's a lot of focus. Yeah, we are trying to get to the top. We get too hung up in kind of position filling and trying to say like, what is the number we are going to report to? But are we really empowering? Like, I think, so what's not happening is, do the people on the ground are always really feeling that they are empowered to influence and make? And are we doing this at a ground up movement to make this a whole culture of inclusion? Or are we tracking it like, this is an office policy? It has to be at the top. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. But I think the implementation of those two are different ways. I think we need to have this more, how do we energize? And I don't think there is a formula, as I said, but how do you energize each and every one? Unless each and every individual, whether they're at the, fresh, at the, just getting in the workforce to all the way, everybody, each of us, unless we can take a responsibility, this is not going to happen. I mean, just like COVID-19, if you think about, right, there is a vaccine out there, but we can only do so much, right? If each of us are not taking responsibility to understand what does it mean, and if I take a vaccine or don't take a vaccine, you cannot impose a policy. So that's what I mean, right? There is a policy you can have, you can create that construct and that for operating rhythm, but we have to operate in that. And each of us, unless we are taking the responsibility, will never be able to move the needle at the rate we want or we need.
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really like that about empowering the ground. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you something different as we are getting towards the end here. And I want to talk more about tech and being a woman in tech. Talk to a lot of women, including myself, who have been told that we are not technical enough, or, we assumed, people assume that we are more like in product or in marketing, or possibly she could not be a woman in tech. What has been your experience? It could be completely different perhaps, but what has been your experience? And then how would you confront this topic for even like mentee women that you mentor, or, people that you mentor in general?
Yeah, I think it has been, for me, it has been mixed. When I worked in India, everybody knew like who I was, from my company, even I was it's a scientist. But coming here many a time, like, I was taken like, do you bring the coffee or, until you open your mouth, right? So, yeah. But I think I would say, make it clear the ground, clear the air first. When you introduce yourself in the room, make sure that you take the 30 seconds to tell who you are and why you have a seat at the table. So take that doubt, like don't even give anybody to make that, kind of take it for granted that, okay, why? So when you introduce yourself, like you are who you are. And so if I'm coming in, Geeta Pyne, I'm the chief enterprise architect. So I'm responsible for your architecture for end to end, period. Yeah. So, and then, so I tell my mentees is, do not worry, do not let anybody, preempt that, somebody making an assumption about you. Take the opportunity very quickly to introduce yourself and get yourself elevator pitch about who you are, very ready, so that nobody has. And do I always practice? No, but get. So you have to stand your ground. You have to make your entry really clear and clear the room with no assumption.
How did you feel about calling your? Well, I guess maybe you specifically may have never experienced this, but like, have you ever practiced calling yourself like something that you did not fully believe you were yet? Like, for instance, the first time you got your architect role, right? Maybe you were super confident about it, maybe, right? But like, I can imagine like my first architect role, I'm going to be like, am I really like fully an architect? But then you go in and you're like, I am, like, have you practiced just saying like, yes, I am the chief architect and this is what I do? And how do you like confront your imposter, maybe like if you have an imposter syndrome?
Oh yes, still today. I'm very sincere and honest about what I do, but at the same time I expect a lot from me, so I'm always like, I'm doing enough. So I still question myself, even if I'm talking to you, like, and I'll like, oh my gosh, she's taking the time to talk to me. Am I the right person to talk? Like,
yes,
just like an example. So I think I still do, but I try to, as I've gotten older, what I have learned, and I tell myself and I'll tell anyone, is if somebody is giving you a job, accept that you can do it. Believe that you can do it, and don't even question, right? And go and start executing on it. And once you start doing it, and if you believe in it, then things will happen, right? I think stop questioning yourself. And also, if you have a question, like if you doubt, you always have, I have people that I can openly talk about, whether it is my team member or my manager or my friend or my husband, anyone. Hey, do you think I can do this? And they will give you an honest answer. So create a couple of people that you know who's not going to bullshit with you, who's not going to flatter you, will give you the honest, dark truth. And if those are the people that are giving you this responsibility and trusting you, just go and execute on it. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Well, I think that's a really perfect way to end this segment of the podcast. I have a couple of outro questions that I want to ask you. Are you ready?
Yes.
What is one thing that we don't know about you?
I don't mess with me. I may be the nicest person and I have a big smile, but nobody messes with that.
I love that. What is a book that you have gifted the most, or that you like recently?
The Art of Impossible.
Get it? Really nice. What is a book you will write?
If I'm not a writer, but if I could, Changing Lens.
Like the horizontal movement that we just talked about. Oh, that's really cool. It's funny how you had that title in your mind, like straight away. Maybe you should write that book, because you had the title. You know exactly what it's going to be about. There's such thing as ghost writers that would write it for you. You just have to talk to them about it.
If I can just talk it out, talk all day long, and somebody can do it. Yes,
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. What is one thing that you want the audience to remember, whether it's about you or the company or this moment in time in history of humanity?
Yeah, this is I think once in a lifetime moment we are going through, right? I think if uncertainty is the point kind of where we are right now. There's a lot of things uncertain. We don't know what the future holds or what tomorrow will be like. But just go, if you have a mission, if you have a dream, just go and make it happen now. Do not wait for tomorrow. Do not wait for day after tomorrow, because we don't know which world we will live in. There'll be a lot more coming in. That's what I honestly believe.
Nice. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Please tell us, what are you doing next? What's happening with you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So next, I would say in a week from now, I'll be again doing. I'll be speaking in a conference. As a panelist, talk about architects, so enterprise architecture, and how do you use architecture for transforming at scale. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Geeta Pyne. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, G Pyne. And look forward to connecting. And thank you so much, Marina. It was a pleasure chatting with you. I didn't even believe that the time went by. And anything for anybody, right? If they have a question to learn about architecture, technology, data, I'm a junkie.
Yes.
Feel free.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'll be sure to connect with you when I get to California. So hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.
Woo! There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your networks and friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for guests at www.unbossed.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unbossed.io. See you next time. Oh, that was good.